Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into the ultimate roadmap for making sure your survey data is completely, undeniably rock solid. If you've ever stared at a massive spreadsheet full of survey responses and kind of wondered in the back of your mind if you can actually trust the numbers, well, you are in exactly the right place. Okay, let's talk about a huge problem that plagues so many researchers, product managers, and marketers. Are you really measuring what you think you're measuring? It's incredibly easy to just write up a list of questions, blast it out, and get thousands of responses. But are you truly capturing those complex human emotions or behaviors you actually set out to measure? Or is a poorly designed questionnaire silently feeding you absolute garbage data, which, let's be honest, is going to lead to terrible business or research decisions? To solve this, we rely on construct validity. Think of it as the architectural blueprint for building a trustworthy measurement tool. Seriously, it's like building a skyscraper. You wouldn't just start pouring concrete without a meticulously reviewed engineering plan, right? Construct validity is that exact level of rigorous methodology, but applied to your surveys. It is the scientific proof that your tool accurately represents the invisible, theoretical concepts you're trying to study. And the journey to get there is a rigorous step-by-step process. It takes us from a super vague idea all the way to statistically proven data. We aren't just guessing here, we're following a highly structured path. Now, while the complete academic cycle actually includes 10 steps for total validation, we're going to focus on the essential first 8 steps today. Those 8 form the absolute core of establishing your structural and survey integrity. To make this incredibly easy to digest, we're grouping these technical steps into 4 distinct phases. First, concept and item development. Second, content validity and pilot. Third, factor analysis, that's your EFA and CFA. And finally, the final validity gates. Let's kick things off with phase 1, concept and item development. Basically defining exactly what we're building because you absolutely cannot measure what you haven't clearly defined. Step 1 is actually really interesting because it forces us to dig into the existing academic literature to establish clear theoretical dimensions. We aren't just broadly asking people about something like brand loyalty. Instead, we break that massive concept down into highly specific measurable subdimensions, things like emotional commitment, continuous commitment, cognitive satisfaction, and behavioral loyalty. You're mapping out the exact anatomy of your concept before you write a single question. Once those dimensions are mapped, we move to step 2. This is where we generate the actual survey items and instantly check their face validity. First, we ask a panel of experts, hey, does this accurately reflect the theory? And just as importantly, we ask the general public, do you actually understand what this question is asking? If it's confusing to everyday people at first glance, it gets rewritten immediately. Right, on to phase 2, content validity and pilot. This phase is all about laying a totally flawless foundation before we go out and collect mass data. So, step 3 is where things get really crucial. We use a panel of experts to calculate the Content Validity Index, or CVI. This is where we shift from subjective opinions to hard math. We literally ask multiple experts to rate every single question on a 4-point scale based on how relevant it is to the core concept. Then we calculate the CVI. If a question scores below a strict 0.78 threshold, meaning the experts don't strongly agree that it belongs, boom, it goes straight into the trash bin. We only keep the absolute strongest items. Now, before going live to the world, step 4 requires a micro-scale pilot test. Think of this as your dress rehearsal. We follow 4 key steps: design it, run it with a small sample of our actual target audience, inspect it for distortion, and refine it. We aren't looking for our final answers here, we're hunting for red flags. Are people taking way too long to answer? Is literally everyone picking option C for question 5? We catch those weird data skews, fix the wording one last time, and lock in the final survey. Awesome. Foundation is set. Now we enter phase 3, factor analysis. This is where we frame the house using some heavy-duty statistical algorithms, and it's where the real magic of data science kicks in. Step 5 introduces exploratory factor analysis, or EFA. It's an amazing tool that looks at the raw data to see which questions naturally group together into distinct factors. You feed your pilot data into the software, and the algorithm blindly looks for patterns. It might show that questions 1, 2, and 3 mathematically cluster together beautifully to represent trust, but it might also flag that question 4 is overlapping with multiple categories or just isn't correlating with anything at all. In EFA, if an item's factor loading is below 0.40, we mercilessly delete it.
It is absolutely vital to understand the difference between the two types of analysis here. EFA is for exploring and discovering the structure. It lets the data speak for itself. It's a bottom-up approach. But CFA, which we're about to do next, is for confirming that the structure actually holds up to your original theory. It's a top-down approach. You take the theoretical model you built way back in step 1, apply it to a brand new large-scale data set, and ask the computer, hey, does reality actually match my theory?
Which brings us perfectly to step 6, CFA. This is where we statistically prove that our carefully designed model truly fits the real-world responses we just collected. Your hidden variables like trust, satisfaction, and loyalty must point perfectly to their designated survey items. CFA tests this exact structural framework under pressure against your massive final data set. To actually pass CFA, your model has to hit some very specific model fit benchmarks, proving the gap between your theory and the actual data is remarkably small. Now, you don't need to memorize all these acronyms, but know this. Metrics like RMSEA and SMRM measure the error, or the gap, between your model and reality. We want those numbers nice and low, typically 0.08 or under. Meanwhile, indices like CFI and TLI measure how well your model performs compared to a terrible baseline model. We want those numbers high, above 0.90. If you hit those marks, congratulations, your structural model is scientifically sound.
Finally, we reach phase 4, the final validity gates. This is the last safety inspection to guarantee absolute structural integrity.
Your model fits, but now we're at the ultimate test of the variables themselves. We have to balance two vital concepts, making sure similar things group tightly together while completely different things stay clearly separated. It's not enough that the model fits overall. The specific questions meant to measure job satisfaction need to act like best friends. They should move together. That's convergent validity. But simultaneously, job satisfaction needs to prove it's an entirely different beast than organizational commitment. They absolutely cannot bleed into each other. That's discriminant validity.
So step 7 focuses on convergent validity, where we check 3 strict criteria to ensure our questions are highly unified. First, every single question must have a factor loading of 0.7 or higher. Second, the average variance extracted, or AVE, must be at least 0.5, meaning your underlying concept explains more than half of the variance in the answers. And finally, composite reliability, or CR, must be over 0.7, which proves high internal consistency. You've got to get all 3 of these green check marks to pass. Then, step 8 checks discriminant validity. This proves that distinct concepts aren't accidentally blending together. I mean, if your respondents can't tell the difference between 2 ideas, your data is totally useless. Historically, we use something called the Fornell-Larker criterion for this, which verifies that a concept shares more variance with its own specific questions than it does with any other concept. It's a great test, for sure, but modern research demands an even stricter gatekeeper. And that strict gatekeeper is the modern HTMT index. This is ruthless. It mathematically compares the correlations of indicators across different constructs to the correlations within the same construct. If your HTMT score creeps up to 0.90 or higher, the software is essentially yelling at you, saying, hey, your respondents think these 2 different ideas are actually the exact same thing. But if your score is under 0.85, you've successfully proven your variables are beautifully, definitively distinct. So what does this all mean? When you complete this rigorous process, you are literally transforming messy human opinions into undeniably reliable, actionable data. Yes, it's a lot of work. Defining dimensions, tossing questions out, running pilots, EFA, CFA, passing the validity gates, but the payoff? Absolute confidence. When you present your findings, you aren't just presenting a hunch anymore. You are presenting statistically verified reality. Armed with this 8-step blueprint, I highly challenge you to look at your next survey differently. Stop settling for surface-level questionnaires and start constructing instruments that truly measure the depths of human behavior. Are you ready to start building? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to see the incredible, reliable data you generate next.